Welcome, IBCers. Bob Redden here, with deep special thanks to Jerry and Lisa Torriello, without whose help this old terminal history would not have been possible. Thanks, guys. I want you to sit back and relax and enjoy some incredible visual images. And if there's no memories in here for you, mercy me. I know that not every Greyhound terminal could be done. It would be a volume of about 50 volumes probably. But some of the more prominent and not so prominent ones are in here. Now, back at the turn of the century, of course, buses weren't organized. There were a lot of little helter-skelter companies floating around, using automobiles, some stretched out. But by the late teens, organization came in the right place at the right time. The big cities all had buses in place for the most part. A lot of them did, not for the most part. There's still trolleys. But very organized companies like Penn, Ohio here would emerge. A great route structure would be set up across the land. But you had to get off one carrier and go to the other until William Vanderbilt created the short line system. However, up in Michigan, followed by the name of Edward Ekstrom, was running a bunch of buses from Grand Rapids, Muskegon, on around the loop into Chicago, and they became affectionately known as the Greyhounds. The actual name of the company was Safety Motor Coach, but Greyhound took over very, very rapidly. Ed Ekstrom would purchase other companies and create motor management in the late 20s. Now, this is his original route structure for the original Greyhound company. Now, in some respects, Hibbing can claim the right of being the birthplace of the American bus industry, the long-haul bus industry, because, first of all, he was from Hibbing, but he had moved around the other side of the lake. He had made some friends when he was in Hibbing, that of Carl Wickman. Now, here is Edward Ekstrom right here, with one of his Fagels. Now, Carl Wickman, he invited on the board of directors of motor management, which was to prove a fatal mistake for Ed Ekstrom. Carl Wickman and his buddies Orville Caesar, shown here, and Ralph Bogan were pretty tough cookies. They were pretty ruthless, and it wasn't any time flat that they had him weaseled right out of his own company. If you ran a Greyhound operation and Ralph Bogan showed up on the property, you knew you were in deep trouble. He was sort of the official Greyhound policeman. Well, these guys got in up to their nose. They started buying, and if they couldn't buy you out, they found other means. However, they were terrible businessmen, good bus operators. And the Goldman Sachs Corporation, the financiers from Wall Street, had a very large percentage, Greyhound by now was public, had a very large percentage of stock in the operation, and as it was ready to go bankrupt, they sent in a fellow by the name of Matthew Robinson to be a financial policeman. He bought these new yellow Z's here, got away from the Wills. They were manufacturing their own coach known as Will. Notice that armrest there? That folds down and becomes a seat for standees. So it's illegal now. You couldn't do it in this day. But the mighty Will was they ceased production. So MCI is not the first time in history they had Greyhound ever made their own buses. And they entered into agreement with Yellow Coach, with henceforth Greyhound and Yellow Coach, which became, of course, GM, would eventually create a very specialized bus for Greyhound if they continued to buy just Yellow Coaches. Of course, GM drug their feet for a while, but eventually it came about. Matt Robinson, though, he was the businessman. He bought beautiful color ads like you saw in that original Yellow Z, bought ads everywhere. And what he bought them in were primarily middle and low income publications. This was, of course, an exceedingly smart move. Now, Goldman Sachs also had a large percentage of some of the studios in Hollywood that went public, which you will see in a second proved instrumental in helping put Greyhound really on the map. But he created new emblems, new shields, beautiful color ads, and so from out of the one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel, Greyhound did come back. As we said, he agreed that the Troika, Wickman, Caesar, and Bogan, they knew the bus industry real good, just keeping the hell away from the cash machine. Now, this is the inside of a yellow Z250 that has bars in the window so you couldn't stick your head out and get killed, quote unquote. It didn't alter too terribly much from the early Yellow Zs. Now here's where it paid off. Hollywood was making a movie called It Happened One Night, of which Goldman Sachs had a great percentage of. And they talked Frank Capra into doing a whole front of it. There's a little runaway rich girl, of course, doing the first front of the movie with her trying to get out of town on an Atlantic Greyhound Yellow Z. Notice that I've got this going in slow motion here. It's a little jerky, but we have to slow it down. Otherwise, you wouldn't get to see too terribly much of anything. We'll do some normal scenes later on. But see that water closet in the corner there? That's exactly what that was. That was a toilet. The big sign inside when you close the door, do not use in stations. So it just went straight to the road. Now here's Ward Bond getting all perturbed because Clark Gable was throwing the newspapers out of the seat. He wanted a seat. Now if you notice, Ward Bond is immaculately attired in a Greyhound driver's uniform of 1933. That was before the 50 Mission crush hats, when they had just straight little red cap hats. But if you have never seen this movie, I urge you do. Big time. Now again, this is done slow motion. We'll let you have it in a second with conventional, the conventional way it was seen in the movie. It just rolls through in a matter of seconds. Now they're running with the spotlight on, and they're running with the fog lights on, which of course was just to put a little light in the image for the director. Frank Capra was a very dramatic director, way ahead of his time. No one ever saw these low-level things and whatnot. Here's a normal perspective. See, you don't get to see very much there. Now this is neat. Of course, Greyhound stopped every couple hours to let you hit the lav if the coach was not lav equipped, and get out, stretch your legs, whatnot, and get a hot dog and a hamburger. Now this is very typical of the early Greyhound days, where they hit just roadside stands and some post houses that were pretty decent. And what happens was, you got 15, 20 minutes here, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever the case happened to have been. Generally the minimum was about 10 minutes. They pretty much hung around 20 for the most part. At least when I started riding Greyhounds. Now here, again, is the normal perspective shot of the car pulling in. There's a whole lot more on this movie. I suggest you get it too. Excuse me. And she pulls away. There's a lot. Now, probably about a third of the way through the bus trip, or halfway through the bus trip, Frank Capra lit up the whole side of these buses. He didn't like this expanse of black. So mysteriously the bus grew lights on the side about halfway through. That's another little thing to watch for. However, now watch Claudette Colbert here walking down the aisle of a yellow Z250. Do you notice anything unusual? Well, they took all the seats out and put the camera on tracks. No window posts. No, not hardly. Frank Capra totally, completely, and utterly reconstructed the inside of a yellow Z250. There's something hardly anybody ever knew. There's an actual shot from the soundstage. It was on a flatbed. If they wanted to, they could roll it into a Greyhound station. Now, there's some discussion as to whether Frank used Pacific cars leaded up Atlantic or actual Atlantic cars, Atlantic Greyhound cars. I am 97% sure they were Atlantic Greyhound cars, and it was done in the Jacksonville station. Not as some say that they were Pacific cars, just let it up. Well, anyhow, it happened. The mighty Supercoach was born. First as the yellow coach 719, then completely remodeled into the yellow 743 series, which not quite 1,000 of them were made. Now this is what we call an impact bus. This was the first car that had underfloor baggage. It had transverse rear-mounted engine, suspension that was absolutely wonderful for the time. This is very rare here. See, now this was an exclusive Greyhound coach. If you weren't friends with Greyhound, you could not buy it. Now here's Washington Motor Coach with the old stewardesses. Those were beautiful cars, orange and blue and white. Oh, but they were running for Greyhound everywhere, and they really kicked Greyhound into the 20th century. They were magnificently beautiful machines. The Corgi Toy Company has a die-cast model out on this thing that's just something to behold. But anyhow, their yellow 743 was born in 1938, and so was I. And that's the first Greyhound I ever laid eyes on, coming out of a rainy, misty night in Lynn, Massachusetts, where I got on the bus at Costello's bookstore, who was a commission agent. And see, it looks like a red stoplight in the middle of the round drum head in the back there. That's not. That's a New York Central Railroad logo. The railroads of America, of course, had great quantities of stock. In some instances, almost owned the companies outright. Like Pennsylvania Greyhound was owned by Pennsylvania Railroad. Central Greyhound was owned by the New York Central System. Richmond, Fredericksburg, Potomac had Richmond Greyhound, Southern Pacific, Cotton Belt, Union Pacific. They were all in Greyhound. The railroads wanted out of passenger trains as early as the 30s. And they figured this was the one that was going to do it. Look at that highly detailed dog behind that guy's head. But the first night I saw this puppy come out of the mist at me, I fell in love. I knew forevermore I was going to love, well, at the time, Greyhounds. Because, you know, I still had a humongous learning curve to go through. Now, at the 1939 40 World's Fair in New York City, they unveiled this. Now, mind you, the 743 was only a few years old. And this came out, the Greyhound Supercoach. The Greyhound Silverside, the Supercoach was the 743. Forgive me there for a second. Medication's kicking in. This was the exhibit at the New York World's Fair. You went in and out the emergency door. Back in those days, of course, when you took a bus trip, oh well, that was a dress-up affair. No matter what you traveled on, it was a dress-up affair. You did not see the drudges that you see today on lines. Everybody had pride in those days, and everybody had a sense of class. Well, my earliest memories are of World War II. I was on them long before that, but my earliest memories of World War II, the incredible Greyhound convoys, the terminals just absolutely mobbed with military. Travel in World War II was a sight that you just couldn't believe it. Old yellow Z's that were getting ready to be retired were brought back into service. Now here's a yellow Z Atlantic Greyhound with a Battle of Britain scheme on it, mind you. When's the last time you ever saw one of those? When did you ever even know they existed? But oh, I used to love the bus stations. They were just like exotic. I was, even back as a child, I guess I was destined to become a people watcher and a creative person making pictures and all that stuff. Because I just looked at them all, just as a young boy, wondering where they were going and what their stories were and all this stuff. Many fellas went off in World War II. Never to ride a Greyhound again. The company made inconceivable amounts of money. Now, I got on in Lynn, Massachusetts, which was 9 miles north of Boston, but then I came here. This is the original Park Square station, which the very first time I laid eyes on when I was a busman, my jaw just hit the deck. This is a post-war shot, of course, with a brill sitting in there. But that's the building back there. And it went right through the block. Arriving coaches curb offloaded on the other side of the building and got right out of there. Boston only gave them 2 spots to bring a bus in. But the buses that were in Park Square, there were like 5 bus terminals there. Alameda, Boston, and Worcester. Mackenzie through line for a little while. It just went on and on. I was absolutely flabbergasted. So now I not only like Greyhounds, I was beginning to like buses as well. Again, this is post-war, of course, just in her final hours. That was a Vermont Transit 4101 and an IC 41 for Eastern Mass Street Railway. The Fall River Division operated inner-city cars from Boston to Fall River. And of course, 90.9% of the Eastern Mass was transit. Then there was little John Alameda's famous Alameda lines alongside, and with aero coaches yet. I mean, whoa, what were these things when I laid eyes on those? But these were my babies. The coach would really load here, of course, but where we got on, we had no problem ever with seats getting on the Lynn. Well, that was closed in the mid-50s, and this opened up, St. James Avenue, of which there's a lot of memories, but none any more astounding than 1987 when Trailways and Greyhound became one. I mean, whoa. Now, this is history. This is gone. Yeah, it still boggles my brains to think of Trailways and Greyhound being one. That's the dumbest thing the ICC ever allowed in the history of the creation of that organization. Another nice memory was the day I came here. Now, there's a Vermont green car in there, which they all looked like to me. But then I came and saw these Vermont Greyhounds. You know, the Pepsi job lettered up for Vermont Transit. Now, they arrived on the other side of the building from what you were just looking at. But we'll let you hear some of these au natural. Well, again, these are not, they're Greyhounds, but they're not. They're Vermont Transit cars. Well, this little girl coming out here, yeah, there she is. Listen to this. In reality, I had gone to get my iced tea, Life's Blood of the South. Again, as we said, they arrived on the what would be the south side of the terminal, with the north side, although the New York gates were on the south side too, but all the other ones departed and arrived from here. Here's another girl. Let you hear her too. Now, as we said, St. James Avenue is history. There's going to be like a new port authority here at South Station in Boston eventually. Greyhound right now has an interim shelter in there, and inside in the station is a ticket agency. Of course, Greyhound gave all the routes north of Boston to Vermont Transit, which goes from one pocket to the other. Now here's a new MC-12 in Vermont Transit colors. Well, Vermont Transit lettering, not Vermont Transit colors. Vermont Transit's primary fleet is still green. But this is what it looks like. It's an easy place to take pictures. But this is the ticket agency inside. Over behind there is where the new Port Authority type terminal is going in. But anyhow, in 1942, which 41, 42 is about where I'm remembering, I boarded my yellow coach. Oh, Lord, did I think that was paradise on earth. What an adventure. What exciting. That boy has a little arcade 743 there. But, of course, that thing weighed about 12 pounds. But, of course, I'd have hit that lady in the head with it if I was there, because I wanted that window. Although my favorite seat in the bus was sitting in the very front seat so I could watch and emulate the driver. I would drive a mythical steering wheel, typical little kid stuff. But that mohair, they had mohair. Boy, that mohair could get itchy if you were really hot. And, of course, it heated you up pretty good, too. Back in these days, air conditioning was by Mother Nature. Now, this is a yellow coach, PG 3701. Now, the flowing teardrop paint job was so successful, it was applied not only to Greyhounds, but all kinds of people copied the thing by the multitude. 25 cents, 10 cents for a child, to Gordon Pillow Service. That was a pillow company that used to have exclusive rights to board the coaches and sell pillows at the major Greyhound terminals. I mean, like in Lynn, the Costello's bookstore, no, but when you got to the major terminals, you could purchase a pillow for the trip. Then it was off to the Big Apple. Sometimes it was a night ride, sometimes it was a day ride. 90% of the time, my parents liked to ride at night. In those days, you could do the trip in about 8.5, 9 hours. The bus would hang around in Park Square, Boston Greyhound Terminal for about 30 minutes before it left, coming from Salem and Lynn. It originated in Salem, Massachusetts, which is, again, Lynn is 9 miles north, and Salem is another 4 miles beyond that. Now, another interesting thing during the course of the trip was the rest stops. Greyhound had, as you saw earlier, it stopped at some pretty quaint ones and some a little more elaborate. But in the mid-30s, they built their very first company store, their very first Greyhound-owned post house. God, did I love this place. Oh, me. I thought this was just super. I have no idea. I mean, here I am, 4, 5, 6 years old. I have no idea why I had this great fascination for this Westport, Connecticut Greyhound post house. This is it. This is 001 in the Greyhound system. Built in the Green Farm section of Westport, Connecticut. Oh, I'd say long about 35, 36, not exactly.